Well, that was totally my fault. Shabbat shalom. Absolutely user error right there.
I was like, Henry, what happened?
But I apologize. Anyway. It's Friday night and I need a nap.
Shabbat shalom. No, welcome to.
We really are a little more sane. I'm Lauren Cruz and welcome to Living Waters, Falling Deeper in Love with God's Word. I am one of your hosts this evening.
Yes, and I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Thank you for joining us.
And yes, this is live and we've just had a debacle. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We are back live. Stephanie was off last week and I hope she had a happy birthday.
I did.
I'm good. And we are continuing with Esther. We are about halfway, I think.
Oh, yeah. Because we have what? I think we're on 6 and 7 or 7.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We have been going through prophecies in the book of Esther. And it is by Joseph Good. And our topics this evening are just desserts and the 17th of Nisan. So I think
good stuff.
I think it is good stuff. I enjoyed it. I did enjoy this week.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you were posting while I was in South Carolina. You're posting on Facebook about
spoilers.
Like, hold it, I haven't read that yet.
Spoilers. No, I started reading it and I'm like, I want to dig into this a little bit. So I just spent. You'll see when we start talking about the 17th of Nisan.
And Rabbi Jason Sobol, he always puts a calendar out, right?
He does. Yes.
And he'll have like what happened on all these days. So
I think I bought that calendar last year, I want to say, because it's neat because you come to different dates and they translate them into the Gregorian calendar and I'm you don't realize, oh, this is the day that the ark landed, this is the day in the Bible that this happened. And it is kind of interesting when you look at the calendars and the dates in that way. And
how they correlate with the feast.
Yes, they always do. Yeah.
And we have to realize that that's going to be an ongoing thing. Mm-hmm. Every major event in our future will correlate with the feast of the Lord.
Oh, okay. I know we have Rosh Hashanah coming up. Have you heard there's supposed to be a lunar eclipse, is it? Or another eclipse?
No, I didn't hear that.
I have to Google that again, but there's like rumblings of some kind of another eclipse.
Yeah, I did hear that there were definite moon happenings like from August to November, December. Like there would be different things happening each month with the full moon.
Neat.
So
very neat.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I was going to give you a plug on your podcast because Stephanie posted a really good podcast with what's our star girl's name again? Giving Sean. No, what's her name?
Erica?
No.
Oh, Shauna.
Yeah. So go, if you haven't had a chance, go and take a listen to her Jules or Grafted podcast.
She was the one that someday we might have to have her on.
Yeah.
But she wrote a few of these books. And it's this was one of them, God's Amazing Star Secret and Manfreding.
Yes.
So so I had her on, and it's very interesting. She talks about the constellations, the moon, everything, and
how all that relates to the feasts, and how all that relates to the tribes, and how
prophecy.
Yes.
It's all involved with prophecy, and it's all involved as well as the feast, because she talks about the 5 prophetic keys. I mean, it's very interesting, and even the Jubilee years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything is according to. I mean, and this has been our theme throughout this entire show. We think in Western time and Western ways, but actually, we must see it through the eyes of the Lord and see things in the Jubilee years and see things according to the feasts and according to the stars in a biblical way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's even, go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I just said it's very interesting.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I was just going to add, there's even prophecy in Esther, which I've never approached this book as a prophetic book. Yeah, I never really did. And I don't know if it's prophecy or if or at the very least continuing parallels, because we have seen absolute Eden language and how it's paralleled throughout the scriptures. We've seen recreation language, and it goes throughout the scripture. So a lot of the points
covenant
language, covenant language, and the marriage feast, and I mean all of that is all throughout the Bible, everywhere.
It is.
And Esther, he's approaching it as if it's a prophecy, and it very well may be, but also it's just also continuing parallels. I mean,
it is. That's that's how I see it too. It's paralleling, because it parallels Messiah,
right? Antichrist or
even the false Messiah. I mean, everything is parallel, and we have to think that way. We have to be able, not have to, but we should read the Bible to understand not just how it applies to our life, but also how it parallels the life of Messiah and everything. He is everywhere in there.
Right.
And things, and he parallels Mordecai with Messiah.
He does, very much so.
So very
and he parallels Haman with Pharaoh with false prophet and Antichrist. So yeah, it's interesting. All right, well, if you have your book, I guess we should start talking about just desserts. That's the chapter that we're on. And it starts, if you do happen to have one of the book, it starts on page 57. So they're short. They're super short. Well, that's why we've been doing two. Pretty much 2 a week, because they're very short chapters. And so.
Yeah. And if you want, then we're kind of in chapter 6 or maybe 7 and 8 this week, right?
Okay. Yeah, we're on Esther, 7 and 8. Yes.
In Esther as well.
Yes.
So, so you can follow along in the Bible is what I meant.
That's right. So, all right. Do you want to read anything from it or jump right in?
Esther 7:1. So the king and Haman came to the feast with Esther, the queen. So that sets the stage. We are where we are in scripture is she's asked him, she's prepared this banquet. She's asked him to come because she, of course, if you remember, she had to go to the king. She had to walk in unannounced and hope that she wasn't killed. And so he welcomed her. So she was able to invite he and Haman to her banquet. And so now this is where we are. They come to the feast.
Right.
Oh, yes. And I'll just read this little part. Haman has no clue to the delicate position into which he has ignorantly placed himself.
I know. I thought that was kind of funny.
And to dine privately in the presence of a king and queen, this was more than most men of Haman's stature could ever hope to achieve.
Right.
So here he is thinking that he is favored, but he's being set up. Totally set up.
Very much so. Yeah.
And of course we all know the story, but what struck me was, and I must have just forgotten this part, but how he responds when she basically lets the cat out of the bag and says, hey, this is what's happening. So it's very interesting, his reaction, because he's so evil and he's so full of himself, but now absolute terror.
He gets it. Yeah, he gets it. And throws himself on, pretty much, she's like lounging on the couch, and he pretty much throws himself on the couch at her mercy.
I know.
I thought that was good. Yeah.
And this is the second day of the banquet.
Yeah.
And so he came the first day, and she didn't say anything. She just said, come back. And I always wondered why she did that. Have you ever thought about that? I'm telling you,
I still have a working theory. I think because this is right around Passover, I honest to goodness think she was doing Passover Seder and Passover, because you can have dinner, you can have, I know Seder is on a specific night, but it's a week long celebration and acknowledgement and I mean, that's a tradition of like having dinners more than one night even. And I bet this is totally me. I bet this is how she revealed herself. And she wanted her king or her husband to see what it's all about. And
that makes sense. That's a good point.
Because
I thought there was maybe a little fear involved, like, I'm
sure. Well, I mean, I gotta reveal myself, but what better way? Like, I want you to experience. This is what all the Jews are doing around the world tonight, in your kingdom. This is what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. This is what they're doing in your kingdom right now. This week, I would be doing this because I am, Israel and Jewish and. And I that's just my working theory. I could be completely wrong.
Good point. Good thought.
But I think she was letting him experience the week of Passover.
Mm-hmm. Or at least the Passover meal one night or
or something. I mean, because it talks about the wine, there's a lot of wine. And so like, I don't know, maybe they were. I don't It's me wishful thinking, I'm sure. There's nothing in the Bible that even suggests that other than the week that all of this is happening. That's the only suggestion. So
and I think it's interesting because he again 3 times he offers her up to half of his kingdom. Mm-hmm. And he can obviously see there's something wrong. She's not acting herself, I'm sure. And then she has to put up with Haman being there, which I'm sure that I wouldn't want Haman being there. This man hates my uncle, and he wants me dead.
I just thought of something else. Okay, she makes this whole thing. Listen, she even says to him, listen, we're about to be destroyed. And she even says destroyed, slain, annihilated, like we're killed. But it would have even been better if we had been made slaves. Yeah. Right. There's even a reference to slavery, and I would have kept my silence. Since so even like, okay, I'm just going to go with my theory. Okay, we just celebrated Passover, and we remembered because our people, the Jews left, left Egypt, and they were enslaved. But it would be better if we would be put back into slavery than to be slain, killed, destroyed, annihilated. So I'm just going to go with my working theory.
Yeah. Well, let me give you something. I like this website, Grace in Torah by Keisha Gallagher.
Yeah.
And she always gives the meaning of numbers. And so if you go to Grace in Torah and put in even like it's .net, but graceintorah.net. But if you go and you can look up the Hebrew numbers. And so this is what the 3 means, because it also relates to the 3rd day of creation, which was seeds, trees, fruit. But it's revelation, resurrection, counsel, witness, and strength. It's new life. And I thought that was interesting. 3 brings harmony and unity to opposites like 1 and 2. 3 creates a solid or a foundation. And I think she meant to say a solid foundation, and makes the first geometric shape of a triangle. So, so you're bringing in, 3 points.
Yeah. Well, we've got 3 banquets. We've got 3 requests. We've got 3 slain, destroyed, slain, annihilated. I mean, there are definitely
there's a lot of 3s. Yeah.
We've seen the 12s, we've seen the 7s, and now we're looking at 3s. Yeah, that's interesting. And 3 people attending this meal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's lots.
So so I thought I'd bring that up because I think it's interesting that it's the 3rd time he's offered her.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, I'm going to write that down. 3s. Because I did not pick that up. 3s in Esther.
and what you said too, Esther's word concerning the Jewish people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish have been echoed through the centuries by numbers of different peoples, each caught in the satanic trap of anti-Semitism. And he brought up the PLO, which has been done away with, the Palestinians. Sorry, I can't talk. Yeah. Palestinians still adhere to that.
They do.
So if you don't know what we're talking about, it's basically, it's a covenant that they had, that the PLO I didn't say that clearly, PLO,
Mm-hmm.
basically put into writing that basically says they are devoted to the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people.
Right.
And so they have kept this covenant intact
Mm-hmm.
and refused to change the context even while peace negotiations with Israel continue to take place.
Mm-hmm.
So those three words have been used by different enemies of the Israelis or Israel.
Yeah.
So and I did think of that when we were talking about three.
Yeah, there's threes, and we got a couple of good comments. Lori says, let's see if I can get up on the screen. That makes sense. We're talking about the threes and the sevens and with the numbers. But she said, do you think that 3 is a covenant number?
So when you think of marriage, right? It's it's your husband, the wife, and then God. I mean, or you can say God, husband, wife. So I mean 3, and what's the verse? A
three-strand cord.
Yeah.
Okay. So but also think about this. We've got for end time prophecy and everything. We've got Messiah, we've got false Messiah, and we've got the speaker, or what are the 3? There's 3 in Revelation 2.
Yeah, there was the false prophet.
Yeah, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and then Messiah.
So the unholy trinity. Yeah.
Yeah, unholy. Yeah. So we've got a couple of different things in there. 3, three-strand cord. Lori says the 3-strand cord can't break. Yeah.
Yep.
So
thank you. I know it was there, Lori. Thanks for telling me.
Yeah. Okay. If you thought that was good, hang on, because it's going to get better in a few minutes.
It is. But this is a short chapter, so I don't want to go too fast. But it says here he quotes Psalm 83, 1-9.
Right.
And he says, "Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace and be still. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people and consulted against your hidden ones. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no longer be remembered. They conspire together." And then he goes and he names them. And the Edom, the Ishmaelites, Moab, the Agarites, Jabal, Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines, and the inhabitants of Tyre, or Tyre, whatever you pronounce that, and then Assyria. So he names all their enemies, and they want us out. They want us dead.
Well, and look at where all those are today. They're the same correlations of the countries that are still attacking Israel.
Yeah.
Edom is still there, know.
Edom is a group of people, not necessarily a nation, but it's a group of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's there. It's definitely there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go through too fast, but
and
then Haman was afraid before the king, and the king was rising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, and the king went out into the garden
I like this part.
Kind of catch a breath. And Haman stood up to beg Esther the queen for his life, for he saw that there was evil determined against him. And then
let me just interject there, because he says that this king was known for his temper.
Right.
And that's an interesting point when you understand that, because why did he get up and leave? Probably so he wouldn't go off the deep end
right now. Yeah, I could have killed him right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a kind of interesting point.
Then the king returns from the palace garden to the place of the wine drinking, and Haman was falling upon the couch where Esther was, and the king said, "Will he also force the queen with me in my own home?" Basically, is what he's saying. So so now we've got, in addition to premeditated murder, there appears to be an attempted rape on the queen as well. So
and obviously not, but I'm sure that's how it looked. He's begging her to not, take it back.
Yeah.
So, and I know you read this, but it just said, you read part of it. Things could not have been worse for Haman, as no man would even dare to carelessly touch the queen.
Exactly.
And so I forget how far you went there, but Yeah, so basically what you said about, he calls it a grotesque vision the king witnessed. So, yeah, I'm sure it did look very sexual because of the way he was probably begging for his life.
Yeah. He does have a little footnote, the bed, it's called a bed in some versions, in some Bible versions, it's a bed, and in some it's a couch. It's really a couch. It was the Persian couch, the kind of like the fainting couch we've seen before.
Yeah.
Chair, you didn't really have tables and chairs. You were kind of reclined. And so that's,
it'd probably be more like the kind of couch where you have one like where you could sit up and extend your legs, right?
Exactly.
Where
right. Yeah. I've
whatever they're called, because it's not coming to me right now.
I think they're called fainting couches.
Oh, really? I haven't heard that term.
Oh, it's a Southern thing.
It might be. I did. Yeah, that wasn't the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. I could be wrong. All right. Well, this is a good part. I love this little part. We were talking about it just a tiny, tiny bit, reading through some of the verses to get some different interpretations of it. But so as word came out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said before the king, "Behold, also the gallows. Look, there just happened to be gallows, 50 cubit highs, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good of the king, stands at the house of Haman." And then the king says, "Well, hang him on it." Yeah. And there's a lot here that we kind of read over fast, and we don't pause to bring in the historical. Yeah, and we don't do the word studies. We just kind of let our Western minds. We understand what a gallows is and hanging on. We get that, but there's more. So, do you want to talk about Harbona? Do you want to talk about Harbona? Because that was something you had mentioned.
Yeah, but also, why did they cover Haman's face? That was right before.
Yeah.
And he says here, he actually gives the answer. Haman's face was quickly covered by the king's men, as was the custom of the Persians. Someone who was to be executed or who displeased the king would have their face covered by a veil or a napkin, marking the beginning of carrying out the sentence of death into execution.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, because how many of us have read that and not given it any second thought?
Yeah, not even,
Why did they cover his face? Like, they probably just figured, you might just think, put a hood on before you hang someone or something. But as we found out, it's not hanging with a rope. Right. And gallows. So let's go into that.
Okay, well, so I'm reading through this, and the first thing that hit me, every time I've heard this in any kind of Bible study, they always talk about these gallows that were built. They took the time to build this, and we went back and looked up, like, because his wife gave him the idea. So I'll read that in a second. But and we always think gallows, and we immediately go to the hanging gallows, right? That prisoners would have been hung on. And then 50 cubits high, everybody's like, we were so tall, you could see it around. So first thing I did is I Googled 50 cubits because I wanted to see how big it is. And it's about 75 feet tall, which is tall, but honestly, it's only as large as tall as two school buses. So, I mean, that's not terribly long. It's about as tall as a tree.
It's still tall, but they probably had ladders, but
Yeah, but I mean, everybody, the way I've ever heard it described, it's like these massive gallows that you would see across the city,
Right.
It's the size of a tree. It's the size of a tree. Well, then I went and I looked up the word gallows, and it is actually, I don't know if I wrote the actual word down, but the Hebrew word is a stake. Like a wooden stake or a tree. It actually means a tree. And so then I immediately thought, well, cursed is the man who's hung on a tree. And then lo and behold, that's the verse he gives us a few minutes. But it's actually a stake or a tree. But I want to read to you the Hebrew version. This is when a Jewish person reads this passage, this is what they find. And it says, let's see if I can find it. Then his wife, and this is Esther chapter 5, verse 14. And all Jerez and all his friends said to him, "Let a stake be put up 50 amot high," and there's a reference to cubits or amot, in the morning and asking the king to be impaled on it, asking the king that Mordecai be impaled on it.
Yeah, that is way different, because if you read it in another version of the Bible, I read the ESV,
Yep.
and it basically says the gallows were made.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so to be even impaled on something.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And we always, I'm sorry, I'm choking. I don't know why. But then we're always thinking of he was hung on it. He was hung on it. So we think of hanging by the neck.
Yeah. Rope
but
and all.
You can be hung on. Jesus was hung on a cross.
Yeah.
He was impaled on it. He was stuck on it.
Yeah. And exactly. He wasn't. Yeah.
Right. And we always say a cross, or and actually the cross wasn't a cross like this that we often think of.
Like
at that time, it was more of an X, and they would hang off of that. It's just because the Romans didn't use the traditional cross that we think of. It was a different use. And so,
and I've even heard one teacher who his name's Aaron Imey. He's what do they call him? Deacon at the church in Jerusalem. And he's a history, like he's a historian. Let me just put it that way. So anyway, he talked about that it was a real tree, and they basically cut off the top of the tree, and they made a part in the top of the tree where another, like the cross beam, could sit down in it.
Oh, interesting.
And so Jesus carried his cross beam because the tree was in the ground.
That's interesting. So, that makes sense. Yeah, I could see that happening. The verse that I was referring to is Deuteronomy 21, 22 through 23. And it says,
Nettie just brought that up.
Yeah, I see that. And if a man has committed a sin deserving death, and he is to be put to death, and you hang him on a tree, and his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but you shall bury him that night, and he who is hanged is accursed by God, that your land which the Lord gives you for an inheritance not be defiled. So that's where you get the idea of cursed is a man that hangs on a tree. It's been worded different ways, but and according to Jewish history too, because of this Deuteronomy verse, being hung on a tree or impaled on a stake is like the most shameful way to die. So I don't know if it's something that they had already believed because of Deuteronomy, or if this was a cultural thing, in the Semitic cultures. I don't know. I just think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she just wrote that, there weren't three crosses. There were three trees. Could be. Yeah, but and you made me think of Judas. So Judas hung himself. So that's a different hanging. If he did it himself, he must have done it with a rope.
He must have, because if he did that to himself, he would have had to have.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look at that word. Yeah. He wasn't hung on something. Somebody didn't hang him on. He did it himself.
They didn't impale him. Yeah. So he definitely did what we might think of a rope and a branch.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it is. So then Harbana, it says here now this is another interesting point in this small, because chapter 7 is really short.
I think it's
14,
15 chapter verses.
Yeah. So 10. So anyway, he's not mentioned much, but he's mentioned at least twice, and he's one of the king's chamberlains. And it says he went to escort Haman to the banquet. Okay, so he's there at Haman's house, basically escorting him because of his title and his position.
Right.
And then he had seen the gallows on Haman's property, or this tree.
Right.
And apparently knew that they were intended for Mordecai. This same servant appears to have been in the presence of the king when the chronicles were read, detailing Mordecai's deed of saving the king's life and the king's desire to honor him. In conjunction with the king's words to hang Haman on the gallows built for Mordecai is the passage from the Torah, which you just read.
Right.
So,
so everything was like all set up, but not for Mordecai. It was already set up for Haman. Already,
and he didn't know he was building his own execution.
Yeah.
And I love this last verse in chapter 7, Esther 7. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
Yeah.
And so he compares it to this Haman hung on the gallows, the king's wrath abated. Even so, as Satan and the false Messiah are judged, God's wrath will be pacified.
Right. I thought that was cool. And also think about too, when Christ was hung on the tree, God's wrath was pacified at that point too, against
for our sins.
For our sins. So I thought there are some good parallels. I just think there's definitely some good.
I think we just read it as like an independent story. Like
it
doesn't really apply to anything else.
Right. But I think that's it. Like we've pulled it out of the Bible and we've just read it as an independent
story. A nice little story to make a movie out of, to write a book about, whatever. But But I think even just understanding, like you said, all the parallels and bringing in who Esther was, and from a historical point of view, understanding that, like Esther, on a timeline, Esther and Nehemiah were the last couple of books that were actually written of the Old Testament, if you put them according to their dates. Yeah. So then you hear nothing.
Right.
There aren't any books written until until James. Right. Actually, James was the first New Testament book written. And so you have these books being written about basically these are the times right before they come back to Israel and everything gets rebuilt. Yeah. So
I think we need to not read it independently. We need to look at it with the lens of how does this fit into the Bible, into the Word.
Yeah. And it's with Babylon and the Persian influence, they came back.
Yes.
And Judaism was born. So even
so
in
good.
the language, they no longer spoke.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's the development. They came back with Aramaic and changed a lot of.
We have to give a plug for the new book we bought.
I did buy that book.
Yep,
I've already read. I read through Galatians again. I know we're off the topic, but I read through Galatians again, and
the reason we bring it up is because
I'm trying to buy it.
This particular friend of ours wrote this, and it's the whole New Testament taken from the Aramaic writings.
Yeah.
And the whole New Testament. So it's very cool.
Yeah. I went ahead and got I read, so go look at it and definitely read the description in Amazon, because there's articles that are in here. Like he cites everything. There when you read it, there's more of his citation and footnotes on the page than the Bible, because he was just explaining so much and footnoting it. And I mean, basically you're buying it to read the articles and the references.
Yeah. Jesus spoke Aramaic. Paul would have spoken
the
disciples. That was, and that's why some of the Hebrew was unknown. I mean, even though they're both Semitic languages, there was a little bit of a difference that it was basically the Pharisees and the priests that knew Hebrew. So I'm sure Jesus.
So I have enjoyed it. I went ahead and I read Galatians because we just got done studying it, and then I actually took a big bite and started reading through some of Revelation, and I didn't even get through the first chapter, and I was like, things are different. Things are not that it's so different, but I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like he's reading through. We'll have to talk about that when we get to the feast and stuff. It's because it relates to the feast. It all relates to the feast.
They all relate. If you don't read the feast and read Revelation with the feast in mind and pointing them out and understanding where they're taking place,
it's all the feast. It's all the feast.
Then you don't understand Revelation. None of us do unless you add the feast.
Right.
Unless you understand the feast. Okay, and that's one of the books we wanted to do, right?
Oh, so we do a plug now. We're totally off track.
I don't have it handy, but maybe
I have it somewhere. Oh, I do. I have it somewhere.
Oh yeah, and I'm sorry, we are off track, but this was the
track.
other book I got. This is the Hebrew Revelation, so this is all in Hebrew. Of course, it's not all because it does have a English part, but yeah. Anyway, so we've been preparing for some of this Revelation stuff because we might be talking more about it.
We will. We're hoping to. We're going to definitely do the feast, but we're going to pull in some of that.
Yeah, stuff. The biblical feast and the end times. That's what I think it's called.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right. We can skip back on track. Okay. Yep. Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. The 17th day of
Nisan. Yeah. With Nisan. And the reason he paused and he did a whole chapter just on this date because that's the date that Haman was killed.
Yes.
And we've mentioned this before. All of these events are happening during Passover, which is Nisan. And so we get one more date that's important. And I thought he's got a really good quote down here on the bottom of page 63. It says, as always, prophecy confirms itself with biblical documentation, and what has happened before happened more than once and will ultimately occur again. So it's just another reference to the date and how it's been just what an important date it has been biblically. So I guess that's how I'll set it up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it because it is.
So it says, Haman died on the 17th. This specific date is profoundly used throughout Scripture as an anniversary of a multitude of events. And so then he goes into it. So there's actually 7. Oh, yes, there are 7, which, surprise, surprise, there's 7.
I know.
7 major events. Yeah, there's 7 major events that happened on this date. And he went through and gave us all of them. So you want to go with the first one? First one's really cool.
Well, I just wanted to look up one thing.
Yeah.
Let me look up the number 17.
Oh, good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So 14, 15, 17. So 17 is the 7th prime number. Thus, some meanings will mirror 7 because it's 7 plus 10. It indicates the meaning of the number 10 will also inform 17, while completeness, divine order, and a congregation are related to this number. The scriptures also reveal that even those who are called to walk in these attributes can act presumptuously in their immaturity. Joseph was 17 when he brought the evil report about his brothers to his father, Jacob. 17 is close to adulthood, but not quite. Thus, immaturity, childishness, underdevelopment, and can be indicative of 17 as pictured in young Joseph. So it's interesting. It's it has the pictographic meaning of mouth, opening, speech. Thus, the mouth reveals whether one is mature or immature. So it's not exactly what we would have thought, but it's interesting. And she does give more. She actually gives Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. The flood of Noah's day opened up on the 17th of the 2nd month. King Rehoboam reigned for 17 years in Jerusalem. So, just different things at that. But anyway, that's just down the road.
That's 17 as a whole. And then let's give him some little nuggets about Nisan's, the 17th of Nisan.
So he does.
Nisan is the first. I don't want to talk over you.
I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just sorry. Nisan is the first of the Hebrew months, if you're not familiar with that. So this is the first month on the Hebrew calendar. So the 17th day of. So go ahead. You go ahead and take the first one.
Okay. So the first one is Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
And the ark rested in the 7th month and on the 17th day of the month. Now, this was what I was going to say. The reason it's the 7th month was because of the difference of the calendars.
Right.
And he actually said that events in scripture that occurred in the month of Nisan prior to slaying of the Passover lamb in Exodus 12 could have been reckoned to have occurred in the 7th month. So yeah, when God gave and decided the calendar, or God gave the calendar to Moses and said it will be the beginning, the first month. At some point, it was the 7th month. So that's what. And so anyway, that was Genesis 8:4, and he says it is difficult to imagine how the 8 people in the ark felt when the ark touched the ground for the first time. They knew that everyone outside the ark had perished. At times, they may have thought that they would surely perish too. All that sustained them was confidence in God according to his promises that they would live. But in reality, of the accomplishments of these promises became manifest on the 17th of Nisan.
That's right. I think that's great. All right. Well, the second major event, and let's keep track of our time, is the parting of the Red Sea. So they left Egypt. The children of Israel left Egypt. It says on the night of the 15th, and I was trying to figure out this timing, and it says they traveled for 3 days, and then they arrived across the street on the 17th of Nisan. So I would assume it'd be like at the end of the day to get your 3 days. So that is
right after Passover.
Yeah, right after
they ate the meal.
Right. So the same thing, they escaped and fled, and this is why we celebrate Passover, because of this specifically. But they crossed the Red Sea on the 17th day of Nisan. And if you think about those, so like let's I'm not going to give it away yet. I was going to say it, but I want you to just look for what is the common theme here as we read off these events and things that are happening. What seems to be the common theme? So, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just reading some King Hezekiah. Well, this one's a little longer because it's Second Chronicles is mentioned, Second Chronicles 29, which if you haven't read Chronicles, it's cool. I like the book. Actually, I find it fascinating because it's basically chronicling the events of David and then his offspring and those kings. And then after the separation of the Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom, the kings that happened. And then once the Northern Kingdom is taken captive, then it's all about Judah. And it's quite interesting because you definitely pick up patterns in there. But it says, King Hezekiah, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. So if you know the story, King Hezekiah's father was evil, and I think his grandfather as well. And so they basically destroyed the temple. So Hezekiah went in and he actually had it repaired and had things put back in order. And it says in 2 Chronicles 29, 10 through 11, now it is in my heart to make a covenant with the Lord God of Israel, that his fierce wrath may turn away from us. My sons, do not now neglect, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before him, to serve him, and that you should minister to him and burn incense. So he strengthened the priesthood, and he divided the priesthood into their orders, just as king. And if you don't know that story, go back to the Old Testament and read some of that. It's very interesting because King David gave them the orders in which they served the priests in the temple, even before the temple was built. Not born. And it says that then Hezekiah sent the priest to cleanse the temple, which had been desecrated by his father Ahaz. They completed their work on the 16th of Nisan and reported back to Hezekiah. And then it says in 2 Chronicles 29:20, and Hezekiah the king rose early, meaning the next morning, and gathered the rulers of the city and went up to the house of the Lord. On the 17th, now that's the verse, but then here's the commentary. On the 17th of Nisan, Hezekiah rose early in the morning, even as the children of Israel came up out of the sea early in the morning. It is important to remember that the scriptures were inspired by God in order to communicate and teach. His word also shows that God keeps his divine appointments. And so the last verse I'll read is just that it says, and the service of the house of the Lord was restored. So the priests took they started that day on the 17th of keeping the priesthood, burning the incense, and bringing the sacrifices.
Right. And rededicated the temple, reopened and rededicated the temple.
Yeah. So now people could bring their sacrifices and their offerings.
Right.
And Hezekiah rejoiced and all the people because of what God had done for the people, for this thing was done suddenly.
Right.
So
before we say the last one that he mentioned, there are others. So we've got Noah's Ark. We've got the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. We've got King Hezekiah. But also before that, we've got number 4 would be when the Israelites first tasted the fruit of the promised land. And when the famine ended and they began to eat the fruit of the land, that actually happened on the 17th of Nisan as well. So that's 4. 1, 2, 3. We've got another one is the events here of Queen Esther. So that's actually 6. So Noah's Ark, entering. The other one we didn't talk about, and they went into slavery and they went into Egypt, and not that they went into slavery, but when they returned with Jacob, that actually happened on the 17th of Nisan as well.
Okay.
So we've got Noah's Ark, we've got the Israelites going into Egypt, we've got them crossing the Red Sea, we've got them eating the fruit of the land because they entered the promised land, they finally ate it. We've got them King Hezekiah rededicating the temple and establishing the priesthood. We've got the events of Queen Esther, and then there's a big one at the end. And I'm curious, are you guys noticing? Are you noticing any patterns?
Yeah, Lori wrote restoration and beginning again. And that's a really good point. Really good observation, Lori, because it's true. And Nettie asked the name of the last book that I showed, but I'll bring that up before we get off the show.
Yeah, Lori, you got it. I mean, all of these events are some kind of new beginnings and restoration of things, recreation. We've got recreation. So Stephanie, what's the last big event that happened on the 17th of Nisan?
And the most significant for all of us.
Yes.
The resurrection of Yeshua.
Yes.
So it says the first day, this is John 20, the first day of the week, cometh, I guess this is King James, Mary Magdalene early. So she came early to the tomb when it was yet dark. And then this is all King James, but anyway, and she saw that the stone had been rolled away. So she came early, which means it was before the light. So we don't know at what point she was there, but the stone was already gone. Yeah. And there are some people who said it happened like right, like in the middle, like we might think at midnight, like right at the beginning of what they would consider the 17th.
Interesting. Because I guess, when does Shabbat officially end? At midnight or at sunrise?
It's sundown.
Sundown. Well, I mean sundown, but then that's the starting point.
Oh, and
sundown to sundown.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting. We got yet another example of restitution, new life, new beginnings, new creations again. So I think it's interesting.
And he just put this, that even as Hezekiah took many of the nobles up with him to the temple, so did Yeshua raise many of the righteous ones at his own resurrection early in the morning. Because, so if you read, he rose from the grave before daybreak, but but the tombs were opening like right away, like it's like very quickly after his death, the tombs were opening. And go to Matthew 27, and I think it's kind of near the end, but he talks about the graves opening and people seeing these people who have been resurrected.
Walking around town. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. The story is not complete until the enemy is completely deposed and restoration is provided. So we've got that as the hope of what's to come. And I thought that was a very nice little look at the 17th of Nisan and how we read over it so quickly and we don't even really pause to think about that. Yeah.
Next chapter's longer, but it's justice and then redemption is chapter 10.
Right.
So And both of those. So, and then he goes into the 10 sons, and that might be really interesting. So,
yeah.
goes
Do
through some of
you think we
letters
have
of
enough to do 2 chapters for next week?
Yeah, but that chapter is pretty long, like the last chapter, so we can end with that definitely.
Okay. Well, I was looking at Redemption. Redemption is not a long chapter, so that's not that much.
Justice is a little longer, but it's definitely recommend this. I mean, we've gone through, we've outlined it pretty well, but definitely it's an easy read, a short.
It is. It's not a thick book. It's a super easy read. If you guys wanted to get into a little more of the detail, and the chapters are super short.
Joseph Good writes other books on the feasts and stuff like that. So good book.
Good. We're looking at our notes. The Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I know there's lots of people who use stuff like that, you know. And but let me show this book one more time. I don't know which one she meant.
That's the book about Revelation.
Yeah, this is probably the last book I showed. So this one is the Hebrew, Revelation, James, and Jude. So 3 books of the Bible are and again, one page is Hebrew and one page is English. And so you can actually look up the words. And because this comes basically from Hebrew scrolls of these books, of these New Testament books. So basically they're taking, because there are Hebrew scrolls of some of these books. And then this was the other book I mentioned, God's Amazing Star Secret. And that's just one of her books. She actually has one, like I said, I have to look for them all.
She's got 3, doesn't she?
She does. I have them here somewhere, but
I have not bought those yet.
Yeah, so here's the other one. Sorry, it says God's Stars in Ancient Archaeology. So make that so it's not, the glare's not on it. And then the last one, 5 Keys That Unlock Bible Prophecy.
She's talked about that one. We've heard that one before.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Good books. They're very, very colorful. If you like,
she does. I mean, that is her thing. She is a wonderful illustrator.
Very colorful pages and different colored fonts and writing. And so so it's easy to read because she separates things that are important by different colors. And so very good, very well done. And like I said, it's larger print and easy to read for anybody. So that's
I guess next week we should bring the feast book next week too, to make sure.
Yeah, we'll have to bring it. I think I usually have it right here like all these other books, but apparently I put that one away.
So no, I don't. Mine's put away as well. So we'll be sure to post it next week at least, so that if you want to read it, you'll have a chance to order it and join us. So, all right. Well, I think we have about a minute left. We're doing pretty good on time.
Well, we have a few minutes actually.
Okay.
3. But so good book. And hopefully you guys have learned a lot from this along with us, and you'll stay tuned for more as we close up the chapters. And again, the last 2 chapters in this book have to do with Esther 8 and 9. And so that's what we'll be reading. And then 10 is so short. It's not much, but
it's not. It goes into Purim, and we'll talk a little bit about Purim.
That's a good idea.
So he's I'm just trying to thumb through the pages real quick. So 10 Sons is a long chapter, so I'm curious
it's a long chapter.
What that is. And I'm sure, so his idea is that this is a prophetic book, and he relates so much of it to anti-Semitism and the false prophet and the false Messiah. So I'm sure something in here at one point is going to kind of begin to tie some of those things more together. So we'll see what happens. All right, Lori, have you purchased this book, or have you just been listening in? I don't know if she's going to have a chance to respond. I'm going to wait and see if she types it in. Okay, I'll let her have a moment. Okay, she says she's just been doing the Bible trivia on her. Do they have a lot of questions about Esther? I'm curious.
So here, I'll put her comment up here because this is glorious. I don't know. She said, I certainly have, but I'm not sure what that was response to because I missed what you may have said.
So she talks about having the Bible trivia app, and I'm talking about doing the I have the Hebrew word Hebrew app on mine so I can practice my vocab. So good. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're about a minute out. So any other final thoughts? Please join, check out some of the other Lamb Network shows, and especially too, as we're beginning to come into the fall season and the fall feast, there's going to be so many opportunities to follow different parshas, different teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just some great
start all over in Genesis.
Yeah, we start all over again. So, and take the chance. If you guys have never done that, if you Google the Parsha readings, I mean, everybody tries to read the Bible in a year, but honestly, this is a much slower pace. You're able to really dig into it and digest it. If you do the Messianic Parshas, that they also include something from the prophets, and then they always include something from the New Testament and how it relates. So yeah, there's definitely some extras in there.
Yes, it is good. Don't be afraid to do it. And there's lots of good sites that talk about the different parshas and understand them very well. So explain them very well. Yeah, very good. So,
Nettie, we'll post it again next week. We'll mention it again because we want you guys to all have a chance to look at it.
We have the book in front of us to show you so you can see it.
Mine's in the closet. So, all right. But we'll post it again, and we'll be sure we show it and give you the title and the author. And next week, we'll even try to remember to post a link so that if you guys are interested in joining us, we'll be okay. All right.
Thank you for joining us. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. If you missed today's show and want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.